Hi and welcome. So we get asked about this a lot, don't we?
Yes.
A lot, where
Yep.
um, one parent has really strong health values and the other doesn't. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to leave dealing with perhaps unsupportive grandparents or friends and family to another podcast because
Yeah.
it is slightly different.
Yeah.
But, getting your partner on board, it can be a real source of conflict. I think, for example, when, a mum perhaps makes a real effort cooking healthy meals and shopping healthily, only for her partner to perhaps go out and feed the kids junk all day.
Yeah.
Or cook really unhealthy meals when it's their turn to cook. And, this might happen when parents are in a relationship, so living together, or separated. So in today's podcast, we're going to discuss both situations, which are both tricky in their own right.
Yeah.
So to start with, Jane, because this is most definitely your department, let's start with how to tackle this when both parents are together. So the families living together in the same home.
Yeah, sure. And I can speak directly from experience here because this was my experience with my husband.
Yeah.
He was tricky too, and I was a bit too idealistic around what I wanted, and he was, just not always on board, or would say he was on board and then would do
His actions
the
are different.
opposite.
Yep.
Yeah, so it used to drive me nuts and was really tricky, especially when our kids were really young.
Yeah.
I guess what I want to say is that over time we've really found a middle, and it's really served our family and our kids well. But in those early stages, it was a real pain point for me. So I guess a really important place to start is that you need to be able to communicate openly. And the best place and time to do this is when you're both calm, you're well fed, and you're rested. So not when it's the heat of the moment and you're both stressed out and there's a kid screaming. Not a good time to talk about it.
Or off the back of a conflict where, he's just brought the kids around of rainbow-coloured ice creams and you're cranky about it. That's not the time to talk, no.
You've got the fallout.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Not the time to talk. That's when we say hurtful things and can really damage the relationship.
Yeah.
So when you're both calm, it's important to really talk to your partner about why it's so important for you that your kids and your family eats healthy. In my experience, you'll need to have this conversation really regularly.
Yeah.
And just that open channels of communication are so important in healthy relationships. What I've learned as a therapist and also in my own experience is just learning how to communicate in relationship can be tricky.
Yeah.
Like my husband and I were not good communicators and still struggle. We've got to work at it. So the earlier you can start, just learning how to communicate, learning to talk about what your needs are for your kids around food, and be open to what their needs are. Something that's really helpful and really helped me was educating or learning together, kind of really helping Andrew understand why healthy eating was so important.
So that's like having a third party almost.
Yeah, definitely.
Rather than it all coming from
Great
you,
point.
there's a third party involved.
Yes.
Whether that be a therapist or whether that be
like a
naturopath or
doctor,
books or documentaries or
Yep. Just where it's someone else and where you're both learning about the importance of nutrition as a team. It can kind of create this shared understanding and commitment to healthier habits.
Yeah.
And it means you're both giving your kids the same message, which is huge for kids. That mum and dad are on the same team is massive.
Yeah.
So provide your partner with information about the benefits of eating whole foods, like overall health. It's going to increase your kids' energy levels. It's going to give them better moods. It's going to help them sleep better.
Reduce sickness. So there's less time off work for you and your partner.
Yes.
And managing sick times as well.
Yeah. That
was a motivator for me and my husband as well.
Yeah.
It's just, we're both busy running our own businesses and we didn't have time for kids to be taking time off school.
Yeah.
Or ourselves. So,
yeah. And I mean, naturally parents want their kids to be healthy.
Of course.
Yeah. So the piece here that I learned the hard way is that we don't want to overwhelm them with information.
Sure.
And we don't want to shove it down their throats. It's kind of it's just finding that balance, that where you're learning together. Some of us are way further down the understanding health track than our partners.
Yep.
So it's kind of coming back to what they can take in and what they can understand. Something else that's really helpful is to cook together, prepare healthy meals together as a family, ideally, but definitely with your partner. It can be a fun way to bond, and it can also teach your kids about healthy eating habits and healthy relationships. Like, we need time together to have healthy relationships. Also,
it's good, sorry to interrupt, but it's probably good for kids to see that it's not just mum in the kitchen all of the time.
100%.
Or it's not just dad in the kitchen all of the time. It's like sometimes there's a team effort involved.
Definitely. And that's had the power of modelling is massive.
Yeah. And that must also reinforce that you're also on the same team.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
I know my kids definitely, the minute they got a whiff of the fact that we had a different opinion about something, they would play on one or the other. And it never ended well.
No.
So, and I'm not just talking about, I'm actually lucky in that my husband's been quite supportive of my health philosophies around things. He loves good food, and he loves, he just loves eating, and he's happy to follow my lead with health. So I've been lucky. But
yeah. And with that is lucky. But I guess the power of modelling, I can't say how big that is.
Of course.
And I notice now my son, because he's always seen his dad in the kitchen, he just goes in and cooks.
Yeah, great.
And I love that. Like, it's not a woman's domain.
No.
Vacuuming's different, but we'll work on that. Important to set realistic goals. So instead of aiming for massive changes, start with small achievable goals. So even if you eat one family meal together, one healthy meal together, as a family each week, and where you find common ground. So you're both empowering each other rather than disempowering each other. You're learning to get on the same team rather than fighting against one another. I think it's really important to emphasize that you're eating healthy so you all feel good. Important to involve and include your partner in decisions about meal planning and grocery shopping. I really think that, like our kids, when our partners feel included, they're more invested in getting on board and making healthier choices.
Could this even, look, I do most of the planning, and that's my thing that I take control of.
Yeah.
Like, he puts out the rubbish bins.
Yeah.
I do this, but for me, as we've kind of grown and evolved together, it even just looks like me telling him what to pick up from the shops sometimes. So he actually is learning, because I found early days it used to frustrate me that he'd go to the shops, but he'd come home with all the wrong brands and the things I didn't like buying, because he wasn't all that observant with what we were eating.
Yeah.
So, at the start spelling out to him that I needed this brand and that brand, and then over time it was like he just knew that they were the brands that I preferred, and that was the products that I prefer him to look out for. And now he's really, really well versed. He should be after 20 years, but
And they sound like small things.
Totally.
But they become big things when you're the one that feels like they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
100%.
Yeah. And it depends. So with Paul, if he was always on board, for me with Andrew, he wasn't always. So
totally.
I've had to kind of have that decision making to kind of where we both feel like we have some power and control.
Yeah.
Maybe we're both control freaks.
So compromise is obviously important.
Definitely. Finding a middle ground.
Yep.
Yeah. And kind of acknowledging that small changes can lead to bigger ones over time, which has definitely been my experience. So if, when possible, just be patient. Change takes time. So be patient with your partner. Just your big breath in as you work through this issue. Yeah. And again, those lines of communication, kind of rather than sit with resentment, which is what I used to do. When you feel that first niggle or that first irritation, speak it out.
Yep.
I'm feeling
good tip.
Yeah, exactly. As I say that, really important for all of us to be mindful of our language and how we express what we would like to happen for our family in regards to food. So I just want to let you all know it's always important to use I statements. So in psychotherapy, we kind of talk about using I statements as having responsible language. So an example of an I statement is, or might be, I feel like it's really important that we eat whole foods and that we reduce processed foods for our family. But when you agree with me about the importance of eating whole foods and then you go out and buy soft drinks for the family, I feel really frustrated. I feel like you don't respect my values, and I feel like it makes my job of reinforcing eating whole foods more difficult, in that I've really owned how it's impacted me, which is really different to you always frustrate me, you always buy processed foods, you always do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I'm taking no ownership in that, and generally that is only going to lead to conflict.
Yes.
So,
just hearing you say it both ways, it's like the first feels really gentle, the second version where you're sounding very, like you're accusing them of doing something wrong, as opposed to, like you said, owning it yourself.
Yeah. So really, really important. And we'll do a whole podcast on communication and language, because it's massive. And I know it's been a huge learning for me in my relationship. I really didn't have very good communication skills when Andrew and I first had Jack.
Yeah.
And so we struggled a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's important to, find a way that you can have conversations about your concerns and be open to their perspective as well. So that you're both accountable, you're both meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
In saying that, I found it's been really important to respect that different upbringings and family of origin values are huge. Some of us, like I had the gift, and it is a real gift, of being fed healthy whole food meals. For my family, it was really normal. We sat down to dinner at night. Homemade cooking was the norm. We didn't really have processed foods, and I'm so grateful to my parents for that. My partner didn't have that. So sometimes when you've had really different upbringings, it's kind of getting to that vulnerable place where you can acknowledge. There's some things about Andrew's upbringing that were way healthier than things about my upbringing. So it's like, but you need to be able to talk about it to kind of work that out, and then work out what, as a team and a partnership, what you want to take forward for your family around food, around how you talk to one another, around how you support each other. And it's, as much as possible, being gentle, rather remembering you're on the same team. I think it's easy to forget that.
Yeah.
And to work to find common ground. Where is a middle for you and your partner? What are shared goals? What do you both want? And to kind of one step at a time, doing one thing that you can both really agree on, and getting curious about your differences rather than constantly fighting against one another. Generally, I've found that leading by example, and again, only because I had that modelling from my own parents, my husband now is way more on board. Yeah, so he's felt the impacts on himself of eating well. He's noticed our kids and how what they've eaten kind of
impacts behaviour and health.
Yeah, definitely. So really important that you kind of keep coming back to focusing on what's best for your kids. And I think that is a real, like, you remember that's how you're in this together.
That's why you're there. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. And this I want to bring in with if you have separated.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. If you've separated and you're not living in the same, because this is obviously all good and well if you're living in the same home.
Yes. But if you're living separately to your kid's parent, always come back to and remind one another it has to be about the kids. What is best for the kids. Because I think we forget as adults how challenging it is for kids.
Yes.
You know, to move from one home to the other home.
Yeah.
I get there's no choice in it, but
No.
I think it's really important to honour and acknowledge that it's hard for the kids. And so the more consistent you can be from one home to the other, the easier it is on your kids. And I really think as adults, it's helpful if we can remember we're the grown-ups, and that sometimes it will mean we need to compromise and find a middle. I understand this can be hard. Some ex-partners won't meet you in the middle, and that can be really challenging. Hopefully, if you have a partner that will meet you in the middle, it's just going to make it easier on your kids. Again, communication is important, and being mindful of how you communicate will be really important. Really important to be careful to not use blaming or shaming language, to come back to those I statements, and to find a middle ground that feels doable for both of you. You know, if they're really struggling eating whole foods, can I help you in some? What can I do to make this easier? Rather than just fly off the handle or, you know, shame or blame that person. Again, super important to have these conversations when you're as calm and well rested as possible, and keep bringing it back to the kids. Depending on the relationship you have, involving your partner, your ex-partner in the decision-making process, to reminding one another you're co-parenting, you know, and this is about wanting the best outcomes for your child, like putting your personal differences aside to get clear on what does this child need from both of us. Yeah, so kind of involving them in this decision-making, keeping those channels of communication as open as you can, finding the common ground that you can, so there is a link from one home to the other, respecting different choices, talking to your kids about that, respecting different choices. It's okay that mum does it different to me or dad does it different to me. This is the reason we do it. I do it this way, and it's cool that you get to experience the way dad does it. As it is so challenging for our kids, we don't want to make it harder than it already is. So really important, we never put our kids in the middle. We never kind of ask them, what did dad do or mum do? What did they say? Just to be kind of go straight directly to that other parent around the food issue or what you need to kind of feel like you're supporting your kid, rather than making your kid do that work in the middle. Kids are so sensitive, and we really attune to how difficult the situation is for you and for their other partner. So really important to approach the situation with empathy, understanding, a willingness to meet in the middle, reminding yourself that it's about your kids, and trying to find a way to feed the kids that meets both of your needs and supports the health and well-being of your kids. Just still trying to get to that point of coming together as a team that's parenting that child. And from what I see in the people that I work with, that can happen over time. Not in every situation. And kids, like I say many times, are way more savvy than we realise. So it's kind of just explaining to them without using them as a pawn in the middle. Does that make sense?
It does. It's awesome. Really great advice. Hopefully, for anyone that's listening that has this particular issue, you've got lots of incredible tips. I've definitely learned something. I think, for me, just listening to the piece about communication and using I language is gold. Because, I mean, I'm in a relationship like anyone else. We have plenty of things we just don't agree on. So instead of me, I tend to probably use more you blame kind of language. So, it's great. Even, for me, who doesn't have this particular problem exactly, I've got a lot out of this podcast. So thank you.
So welcome. Thank you.